Are you a cat person or a dog person? Or both? Are you a Democrat or a Republican? Are you a good witch or a bad witch? Are you pro-choice or pro-life? Sometimes we think we know who we are, and then we're faced with a situation that challenges our understanding of that. For me, one situation like this came up in college. It was a moonless night, and a group of my friends was standing out in front of our dorm talking and laughing when one friend touched my elbow from behind. She quietly asked me if we could talk. Sure. Now? She said, no, when everyone goes inside. I nodded, understanding she was seeking a private conversation. And when the others were ready to go inside, I said I wanted to stay and look at the stars for a couple of minutes. My friend kindly volunteered to stay with me. Once everyone else had gone in, the two of us sat on large rocks that were out of the direct light. And looking away from me at the ground, she began sharing. She told me she was afraid she might be pregnant. She was really scared and uncertain of what was going to happen, and she wanted to know something. If she decided to go to an abortion clinic, would I go with her? I entered one of those moments where you have 1,000 thoughts at the same time. I recognized what it took for her to ask me. She was scared. I knew she was closer to some of our other friends, but I also knew why she might have feared to ask them. And I was in my second year of college, so I had come to college as a Pentecostal, and while I was moving away from evangelical traditions, if asked, I would have told you I was pro-life. My understanding of God and theology and the world and my friend and myself crashed into each other at that moment, as though I had been caught up in an ocean wave. And when everything hit the shore, I found my previous understanding of myself was not sufficient. I was being asked by a friend to stand by her as she made a choice about what would happen next in her life. And in that moment, I knew I was pro-choice. I said, of course I will. She needed my support. She needed my compassion. And she needed my car. I was one of the few members of our group who came to school with a car, and there are some things I want to unpack about that, but let's come back to that in a few minutes. When my friend asked me if I would go with her, it was at that point that reproductive rights became about more than a bumper sticker debate between pro-life and pro-choice camps. Reproductive rights became about a real person in front of me. Can or should a woman be allowed to make a choice to end her pregnancy? This is often the extent of our political and social consideration of reproductive freedom. It is, we find, one of the most difficult things to talk about because we've been handed this artificial debate with two sides that are talking about different things. On the one side, we're told pro-life people want to save the lives of babies. On the other side, we're told pro-choice people value respecting and supporting women's agency over their own bodies. But I call this debate artificial because when this is all we are given to consider, we're missing a lot of important depth. As youths, we are called to explore the depths and challenge our understandings in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Here at our church, we chose the issue of reproductive justice as our social justice exploration for this year. So what does that mean for us? What is this topic we're exploring? Let's start with the phrase itself, reproductive justice. Sometimes it gets conflated with abortion rights, but that's an oversimplification and even a misuse. Reproductive justice is a specific terminology coined by 12 women of color in 1994 who had attended a conference on population and development in Egypt. At that conference, people from around the world recognized the freedom to plan one's own family is central to strengthening the development of nations. Afterward, these women of color stayed in touch with one another and continued their discussions about the limits of healthcare reform as was being proposed by the Clinton administration. They were troubled by the Clinton proposal because it did not guarantee access to abortion, nor did it take into account many other needs they were seeing in their communities. They also recognized that the pro-choice movement, at least as it was often publicized, did not have a strong understanding of how reproductive rights are inseparable from issues of social justice and human rights, especially as they affect women on the margins of society. The group named themselves Women of African Descent for Reproductive Justice, offering the world a new phrase and a new framework. So what is this framework? What is reproductive justice? One group explains it this way. Reproductive justice exists when all people have the social, political, and economic power and resources to make health decisions about our gender, bodies, sexuality, and families for ourselves and our communities. Reproductive justice aims to transform power inequalities and create long-term systemic change, and therefore relies on the leadership of communities most impacted by reproductive oppression. The reproductive justice framework recognizes that all individuals are a part of families and communities, and that our strategies must consist of entire communities in order to support individuals. So let's unpack that just a little. As individuals, we have varying degrees of reproductive health. This is how our body is doing and is a fairly complex system that informs our ability to reproduce. There's also a community level of reproductive health. What factors in our community haven't gone into our ability to reproduce? As individuals living alongside others, we also have a certain set of reproductive rights. If we assume that humans have the right to control their reproductive health, just as they have the right to control and make choices about other areas of their health, then this is where politics comes into play. How is this right supported or restricted by the government we are currently living under? We can find endless news articles reporting on bills in various states that are shifting or restricting these rights. This is where we focus our conversations most of the time. But a reproductive justice framework calls us to take an even broader look at these issues. It takes us beyond individual choice and looks at the entire system. When people say they are protecting choice, reproductive justice advocates are likely to ask, choice for whom? If we maintain the legal right to end a pregnancy, who is able to take advantage of that right and make that choice? And will the choice be equally free for all? Remember, reproductive justice exists when all people have the social, political, economic power and resources to make health decisions. So what does that mean? Let's start with social power. Social power is the power we have with our peers and in society. Consider a woman who's in college when she gets pregnant and who wants to continue the pregnancy and become a parent, but her family and friends and others tell her she is foolish, she'll ruin her life, she'll never graduate, etc. Does she have the social power to make a true choice? Does that change if she's afraid that everyone will turn away from her? If her parents refuse to continue paying for college if she's going to waste it anyway? If her healthcare providers don't communicate with her openly and honestly? If her professors have classroom policies that favor child-free students? Moving on to political power. In this woman's situation, is there access to a wide range of legal options? Does she have access to adequate and affordable health care? In the United States, carrying a pregnancy to term is dangerous. The U.S. is ranked 46th out of 184 countries for maternal mortality rate. The United States is. A mother is 4 times as likely to die during pregnancy or while giving birth than people in Greenland or Iceland, and twice as likely as women in Canada. And a Black woman is 4 times more likely than a white woman to die giving birth. By contrast, a study in 2012 found that getting an abortion is 14 times safer than giving birth. So what does it mean to be pro-choice in light of these statistics? Even if the legal right to abortion is preserved, can each woman make the choice to end a pregnancy or continue one, knowing that her choice is supported by the political system in which she lives? If she continues her pregnancy and parents as a young, single, poor parent, will there be a safety net to support her? Will politicians point to her and others like her as a sign of social decline and a problem that should be done away with? Will they ensure she can access quality daycare and education options for her child? Will they protect her if an employer discriminates against pregnant and parenting people? Will they make decisions that protect the water, the land, the air quality, and other aspects of the environment that she and her family live within? These are all questions of political power. So what about economic power? Remember when I mentioned that I was the only person in my friend group that had a car? We were in Kansas, and she knew that if she needed an abortion, we would have to drive 3.5 hours to get to a clinic. In our state economic system, without public transportation and comprehensive local health care, I had a lot of power over her ability to make a choice and access safe legal abortion. Another aspect of economic power in reproductive matters is a family's ability to raise a child. 60% of women who have an abortion are already mothers. If a woman with 3 children is pregnant, does our economic system ensure her family will have the resources to support another child? Our modern welfare system grew from state mothers' pension programs. These programs were intended to support single mothers so that they would not be required to work full-time outside the home and could focus on raising their children. Of course, the mothers people expected to take advantage of this were mostly white. Women of color in our country have always been expected to work. So when it was clear that they and their children were also benefiting from the system, an anti-welfare movement grew, and the myth of the welfare queen was born. During the Clinton administration, changes to the welfare system allowed states to cap the number of children in a family. If a woman had a child while she was on welfare, there wouldn't be any additional support for that new child. 22 states adopted such laws, and several still have them. If a new baby would result in less food for the children one has already committed to caring for, is legal access to abortion fully protecting choice? The reproductive justice framework calls us to dig deep and ask these hard questions. Reproductive justice is intersectional. Another way to look at it is that it's deeply tied into the web that connects issues of racism, sexism, heterosexism, poverty, and care for our environment. It is so much more than bumper sticker slogans of pro-life and pro-choice. And there are many organizations across the United States that are doing this work for reproductive justice. I want to talk about one in particular, the Mother's Milk Project. This project was organized by Katsy Cook, a Mohawk Native American midwife and activist. She coined the term first environment to talk about the fact that a womb is the first environment in which each of us lives. One author writes, "The project is is grounded in the centrality of women's bodies and birthing in Native American culture. A woman's body is seen as the first environment and is not separable from external environments. With this understanding, reproductive rights struggles are a part of struggles for sovereignty and land. Degrading the health of mothers and their children is organically connected to the degradation of native lands. The Mohawk people have been faced with serious contamination of their lands by General Motors at the St. Lawrence River. It's a site that was declared a Superfund site by the EPA, and as of 2017, there were still significant levels of contamination in the fish sampled from that river. Protesting the actions of General Motors is in part a reproductive rights struggle. Winona LaDuke explains that the company tainted the land, water, and ultimately the bodies of the Mohawk people, their babies included. For Native American women, environmental justice and reproductive rights struggles intertwine in the bodies of each woman. Katsi Cook and other women created the Mother's Milk Project in 1985 to understand these contaminants in the local food chain. That's how long this has been going on, including mother's breast milk. Katsi convinced scientists to help investigate the level of toxicity in breast milk and in the mothers and infants themselves. But when the results came back, Katsi found that the members of the project didn't have the knowledge they needed to interpret and understand the results presented to them. Reproductive concerns were intertwining with environmental concerns and education concerns. Again, we see how justice issues are inseparable. In response, the project trained about 125 Mohawk women to be health researchers and advocates. Based on research finding dangerous levels of chemicals in the bodies of pregnant and nursing women who ate fish from the contaminated St. Lawrence River, the Mother's Milk Project encouraged women to stop eating that fish, despite it being central to their cultural way of life, and a great loss to let go of. Educating women about scientific research techniques, integrating knowledge of cultural food traditions, these are not the actions the news would typically have us associate with reproductive choice activism. But when we take on a justice lens, we see how one cannot limit the conversations about reproductive choice to laws about abortion. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to this understanding that social justice issues are complex and intersectional. Racism connects with economic justice, environmental issues connect to sexism. If we value reproductive justice, we must get comfortable talking about racism, economic inequality, environmental issues, education needs, sexism, ableism, and so much more. In 2015, UU congregations studied reproductive justice as one of our congregational study action issues. And there are some resources online collected from that time, which we'll be exploring this year. Our churches have also partnered with the United Church of Christ to create a comprehensive Our Whole Lives Sexuality education program that helps people access the information and explore the religious values that can inform choices about our sexual and reproductive lives. Our UU principles explicitly call us to strive to create a world of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We seek justice because we value life on this planet, and we value the children who have yet to come into this world. We want to create a more just, more compassionate reality for them. Striving for reproductive justice and giving people true choices about the role they will play in bringing about this future is central to living out this UU principle. As we spend this year exploring reproductive justice, I encourage you to look into some of the organizations that are already out there doing this work, particularly those agencies doing work with marginalized communities. When the conversation comes up in your lives, consider helping the people you are talking to step past the bumper sticker to the deeper realities of justice. My beloved spiritual companions, let us be pro-life, attending to the environmental, social, political, and economic realities that people thrive. Let us be pro-choice, working together to create a world where every person is supported in making decisions about their own bodies and their own futures. Let us turn away from the bumper sticker debates we have come to expect and listen to those on the margins, following their lead and striving for justice. Amen. Blessed be.